Hello, dear all. Today we are going to discuss the essay titled The Function of Criticism, written by T.S. Eliot. In the last video, I have already discussed Eliot's essay Tradition and Individual Talent. And why I am talking about tradition and individual talent here is because this essay came as a reaction or as an answer to the previous essay. So, as we all know that Tradition and Individual Talent was published in 1919, and therein Eliot talked in detail about what is the necessity of tradition, and to become a poet, how traditionary we must be, how we must follow all the earlier writers, plus how a poet must maintain his individuality and he must write about anything, any topic, any object being highly impersonal. His personality should not be mixed with it. In this video, the description box of this video, I am sharing the link of Tradition and Individual Talent. So if you want to know about that essay in detail, you can go there and follow it. So why I am giving an introduction to the previous essay? Because when in 1990 Tradition and Individual Talent was published, what happened? It rose a kind of controversy. And there was a critic named Middleton Murray who challenged the opinions of Eliot in his essay. And he wrote his essay titled Romanticism and the Tradition. In that, he criticized Eliot and his essay Tradition and Individual Talent. So, in response to Murray's challenge, Eliot writes this essay. And this originally was published in 1923. So the present essay is Eliot's reply to Murray, and it is divided into three parts. Actually, four parts. The first part is a brief introduction of Eliot's own views. What are his opinions about tradition and individual talent? In the second part, he gives us a resume of the views of Middleton Murray. In the third part, these views of Murray are briefly dismissed, and Eliot points out his own stand here. And in the fourth part, which can be generally categorized as the concluding part, poet examines the different aspects of the nature and function of criticism. So, let's begin all the four parts analysis of this essay. First of all, Eliot begins the essay by referring to certain views he has expressed in his earlier essays, tradition and individual talent, because they are relevant to the present essay. So he talks about tradition, he talks about individual talent, how the entire literature of Europe from Homer down to the present days is important for an individual to establish him as a writer. And then he talks about, obviously, individual talent also. So he gives us an overview in the first part. And then Eliot also gives us the definition of criticism and its ends, its necessity, why it is necessary, what is the value or the worth of criticism. And Eliot's view on criticism derive from his views, obviously, from his essay, Art and Tradition. And he defines criticism as the commentation and exposition of works of art by means of written words. So if a work of art is done, written, its commentation, its exposition is criticism. So criticism can never be autotelic. It must be logical. It may have some ends, it may have a moral purpose, a religious purpose, a cultural purpose, but art need not be aware of these ends. Rather, it performs its function better by being indifferent to such ends. So, if you are already prejudiced by something that this culture is good, this religion is good, and then you are working on a piece of art, that is not the real end of any work of art. But criticism always has one and the only definite end. So art can have various purpose. It can be religious, it can be moral, it can be having some kind of cultural aspect to it. But criticism has only one purpose, only one end, and that is, I'm quoting him, elucidation of works of art and the correction of taste. So, the promotion of understanding and enjoyment of literature. So, if a work of art is done, its real correction is done by criticism. So, that is why criticism is important, and that is the only end or purpose of criticism. In the next part, he critiques upon Murray's views, because Middleton Murray, in his essay, expressed his views on classicism and romanticism. And he says that romanticism is something which is quite English in origin, and French are the classics. And in this respect, Eliot praises Murray, but he does not agree with him when he makes the issue a national and radical one. Why? Because they are Englishmen, so English are better, romantics are better, and he takes their stand. And he says that the genius of the French is classic and that of English is romantic. Murray further relates Catholicism in religion with classicism in literature, for both believe in tradition. Just like in religion, Catholics are the ancient one, and in literature, the classics are the ancient one, and they believe in tradition, in discipline, in obedience to some authority. Whereas in romanticism, it is more Protestant kind, it is Protestantism, and social liberalism is related to it, and there is an inner faith, an inner voice of the individual which is reflected. They care not for the rules and traditions, they are free from rules and traditions. So Eliot does not agree on these views. And I'm quoting Eliot here, what he says: the difference between the complete and the fragmentary, the adult and the immature, the orderly and the chaotic is the difference between classicism and romanticism. So, Eliot never takes the favor of romanticism. Romanticism, according to him, is chaotic, it is immature, it is fragmentary. On the other hand, classicism is better, it is complete, it is adult, it is mature and orderly. So this is the view of Eliot here, and Eliot says that if a writer feels free to break from rules and show no sense of tradition, then what will become? It will become a kind of what one likes can do. So that is indiscipline. That is sign of indiscipline. That is a sign of vanity, sign of fear, sign of lust. You can do whatever you feel. No sense for discipline, no sense for tradition. That is not allowed according to Eliot. Now, he also talks about criticism and creation. And that is his fourth part, where he says that Eliot deals with the problem of criticism in all its manifold aspects. In the very beginning, he comments upon the terms of critical and creative. And see, here he also ridicules Matthew Arnold also. Why? Because Arnold had somewhere or the other, he had a kind of view, and he gave a difference between critical and creative activity. But that does not go with Eliot. He does not realize that criticism is of capital importance in the works of creation. So criticism is very important when you are working on any piece of art. If you are a poet, you must also be a critic. As a matter of fact, the larger part of the labor of an author is composing his work is critical labor. The labor of shifting, combining, constructing, expunging, correcting, testing. So if you are working on any literature, if you are writing a poetry or a fiction or whatever, if you are not a critic, if you are not looking at your own work with your critical eyes and deleting what is unnecessary and continuing with what is good, then you as a poet will also fail. So you must be critical in order to write about in order to actually create any work of art. So critical and creative are basically not two different things, what Arnold said, but critical and creative are only same thing according to Eliot. And then he tells us about he tells us about how he ridicules those who decry the critical toil of the artist and holds the view that the greatest artist is an unconscious artist. He calls upon concepts wiggery and pours his ridicule on such people. Why? Because the greatest artist is not unconscious. An artist must always be conscious. And he commends those who, instead of relying on the inner voice or inspiration, conform to tradition, and this way try to make their works as free from defects as possible. So these things told by Arnold is not accepted by Eliot. And he also says that it is mistake to separate critical and creative activities. A large part of creation, it is really criticism, but critical writing cannot be creative. There can be no creative criticism. See, a critical he says that a creation must be critical. If you are working on a creation, you must be critical of it, but if you are critiquing upon something, it must not be creative. There is nothing such as creative criticism. You have to be critical about anything that you are going to critique upon. So you cannot defend, you cannot be full of prejudice, and defending, you can say that okay, this happened, so maybe we can defend the author, and you are trying to construct the author in a positive way, so that would be a creative kind of criticism which is not accepted by Eliot. And then we must talk about about Eliot's view as a critic and his qualifications as a critic. So Eliot next talks about the qualification of a critic. The critic must be or an ideal critic must must have a highly developed sense of fact. The sense of fact is a rare gift, and not everyone has it. It cannot be easily genetically given, but you have to practice it, you have to develop it slowly. The value of a practitioner's criticism, say that of poet on his own art, is workshop criticism. So you have to work on it, you have to put on labor on it, and unless and until you put on labor in it and try to work more hard and hard on it, you will not be able to grow as a critic. And then he compares and analyzes the chief tools of a critic. And what are the chief tools of a critic? He must use care and intelligence. Comparison and analysis can be possible only when the critic knows the fact about the works which are to be compared and analyzed. So, if you are working on any art and you are going to critique upon that work of art, you must be aware about the facts related to that art. The critic must know the facts about the works of art, its technical elements, its structure, its content, its theme, and not waste his time in irrelevant fact hunting, as inquiring about the number of times giraffes were mentioned in the English novel. So he says that what is more important is its texture, its technical elements, not that when and where it was published, and what was the thing which went into the making of that poetry. So those are not quite relevant, or how many times a word is repeated in that work of art, that is not important. What is important is the technicalities of the work of art. So this is all. And Eliot actually Eliot warns against fact hunting, because if you go on digging deep into what were the facts which produced a work of art, then it will disrupt the taste of the work of art. Just like he gives an example of Coleridge and Goethe is always misleading. The impressionist criticism is always misleading. The function of his criticism is to educate taste, or as Eliot puts it elsewhere, to promote enjoyment and understanding of literature. So now facts, however trivial, can never corrupt taste. They can only gratify taste. Critics like Goethe or Coleridge, who supply opinion or fancy, are the real corruptors. Because you see, Coleridge, it's well-known fact that Coleridge wrote Kubla Khan after eating opium, consuming opium, and in a dream he wrote half of the poem is complete, half of it is not complete. So it is all full of fancy and supernatural use of supernatural. So he says that such kind of poets are the real corruptors. And at the end, Eliot gives us a warning against not to become slaves of facts and to bother about trivialities, as how many times Shakespeare paid his laundry bills. That is not our concern. Our concern is about the text of Shakespeare, what Shakespeare wrote, not about the history of Shakespeare. So that is why he more and more says that fact hunting is not necessary. It is clear that his critical stand is with new critics, just like F.R. Lewis and I. Richards. He commends textual criticism, and he says that he is against the lemon squeezer school of critics who try to squeeze out every drop of meaning out of words. So, one critic must always concentrate on the text, compare and analyze it, but never stoop to trivialities or empty hair splitting, like trying out every bit and detail of the word by word analysis. Actually, it must be more of an objective approach, a toto approach. And a good critic is objective. His judgment is based on facts. He must be guided by tradition, and the tradition which has accumulated wisdoms of ages, but not by his inner voice. So here he again, throughout he has been shunning romanticism and expressing one feeling. Again he says that inner voice must be not heard, and the critic must not indulge himself in fancy or expressing his opinion. And Eliot is therefore against impressionistic criticism, and he does not expound any theories as such, or draw any rules as these are the principles and these are the rules that you have to follow, but he gives us a more outlook into fact seeking, and fact seeking alone. The critic should be guided by facts alone, and he should approach the work of art with a free mind, being unprejudiced, no prejudices, no preconceived notions. It must be objective, impersonal. It must be just like science. It must not be very impersonal in nature. It must have logic behind it. And obviously the critic must not totally believe in the truth of the previous ages, because he says that truths are also provisionals. For truth of one age are likely to be modified and corrected by the truths of the future ages. Because if one scientific discovery is made today, like if today it is believed that the earth is flat, and next day it is found that no, we were wrong, the earth is round. So the truth of the previous age may be different from the truth of the coming age or the present age. So one must follow tradition, but not blindly follow tradition, and one must not believe in provisional truths. In this objective scientific attitude, Eliot differs from all the previous English critics, because he has got individuality, he has got originality, and he is just like a scientist who is working with an open mind and cooperating with the others for the realization of truth, and truth which he knows is and can only be tentative. There is no concrete truth as such. So that is all about Eliot. I'm sure you must have understood the essay Function of Criticism. If yes, and if you have been benefited by the video, then please like, share, subscribe and comment. Thank you.